Hi, hello, and welcome, or welcome back, I suppose. Apologies for being a little late. I might just have to start shifting things to Fridays from now on. It depends how well I can catch up on what I have set up. I don't have a real excuse. I celebrated mine and a friend's birthday, got rather drunk, got hungover for multiple days. I also managed to pull a muscle in my neck by coughing too hard. 27 is treating me well, and also that hangover has led to me just being mad congested for a few days, so if I sound gross, that's why. Anyway, that's not why you're here. You're here for the next step on my romantic sojourn, and today that takes us to Gods of Love by Nicola Mostyn. I found this book at a store in my local market, whole metric ton of secondhand books in there, and good luck if you're looking for something specific. Now, when I picked this up and read the blurb, I was admittedly dubious as to the quality that lay inside the pages, but that's mostly down to just me being cynical about a lot of romance books. Well, any book in general, but the quality of this genre in particular is kind of difficult to suss out sometimes. Like, with a lot of genres, I can read a blurb and go, no. But with romance, sometimes that can be difficult. But I figured, hey, I review books. If it's ass, it's still entertainment for you guys. And also, there's going to be spoilers ahead. So, Gods of Love follows Frida, a divorce lawyer who, thanks to her own and her clients' experiences, has become rather cynical about love on the whole. One day, a rather erratic man named Dan bursts into her office unannounced and tries to warn her against going to an appointment she has at a tech firm the following day. He has no reason to know she has this appointment, and she has no real reason to trust him, so she does what I think most would in her situation, and she just has him removed by security and carries on with her day. Little does she know that Dan has every reason to know what's going on, and he has done for a little while now. He's the latest in a long line of oracles dating back to ancient Greece. If you know about the Oracle of Delphi, you know where Dan's family tree goes back to. He's never had his family history hidden from him, but Frida hasn't been so lucky. Turns out she's also come from a family tree of mythical proportions. She's a descendant of Eros, the Greek OG to Rome's Cupid. This family lineage is what's going to help her save the world. Because the meeting Dan burst into her office about is at a multi-billion-dollar tech firm called Neostar. It isn't 100% clear what the meeting pertains to, but it seems like it could be about a new one-of-one phone they're releasing in a kind of sweepstake. The Neostar office is a clinically modern place, screaming at you that it's a cool tech company. An upper management type named Clive leads her to a meeting space quite unlike anything else in the space. It's rich in a classical way, full of old paintings and sculptures, specifically of ancient Greek and Roman, but like we all know where the Romans got that from. Ancient Greek mythical figures like Caravaggio's Medusa, Goya's Saturn devouring sun, and while I don't know the specific painting, Cupid is also present, and he will be throughout, for obvious reasons. She's left alone in the room for a while, but she's offered coffee from a pot which she ends up accidentally dropping and breaking, which turns out to be hugely in her favour, as we would later find out that that had been drugged. She's been locked in there, and they know who she is, even if she isn't aware yet, and they want to render her useless so their plans can go forth. But hey, Dan's an oracle, and he has his ways. Small things have been hidden in and around the office in order to help her escape, and once she does, she finds Dan, and the two of them are set to save the world from Neostar, or rather, the spurned god who runs it, Antiros. I want to start off by saying that I know plenty of people who are mad big on ancient Greek and Roman myth, and this does somewhat blend the two, mostly focusing on the former. I am not an expert. I find it interesting. I know a lot of the stories, but I know that I can look at this book and have a lot of fun with what it's putting down myth-wise without knowing how accurate it is to any myths or if it falls into any sort of pop culture pitfalls of how these myths have been told. But for me, I had fun. I like how it played with the figures it brought up and how it used tech stuff alongside that without it feeling cringe. The Neo Star Company makes so much sense for what Antiros wants, and that isn't something that feels. Look, sometimes people use old characters and figures and they bring them to like the future/present, and it feels weird because it's just like, oh, I'm an old man confounded by everything here. Here, Mostyn actually understands that these aren't just ancient figures, but they're something that can shift and grow with time and humanity. But back to my original point. Please don't be mad at me if you read this and it doesn't interpret myths and figures in the way that you expect. I am not an expert. I'm sure it'll be the Hades and Persephone stuff because I've never seen anybody be happy about the way they're adapted. I don't know that myth. So, shh, it's fine. But look, let's get on to the stuff I can actually talk about. The writing stuff. You learn the tone of this book immediately. Don't get me wrong, you can often figure out some vibes from the opening page, but it's nice to find exactly what you're getting from the moment you start. The thing about being a divorce lawyer is you don't exactly get to see the nicer side of human nature. You can think positive all you want, but after you meet the 100th wife whose husband has been having it away with his 20-something colleague, you start to despair, not just of the fickleness of the human race, but of their sheer failure of imagination. Right away I was in. I knew what I was in for. I knew the vibe, at least the general romance side of the vibe. Frida has little faith in people and love, and someone is going to come into her life and test that cynical nature. Is it groundbreaking? No, not exactly, but it isn't what's being told here, but rather how it's being told, and also the characters it's being told with, and on all counts here, I was kept incredibly happy. Frida isn't turned into a completely different person just because she's had her shell cracked. Dan isn't a walking red flag, which we all know is too bloody common in this genre. It's acknowledged that the timescale is short and that there's a weirdness in the fact that Dan knows a whole lot more about Frida than she does about him, given the whole Oracle thing. And all of those are acknowledged in a way that feels natural, rather than it feeling like an author being like, no guys, it's okay, I understand, it's fine. He gets to see sides of her that the visions never could have shown him, and she gets to discover new parts of herself and her confidence, and she gets to know a fit guy who wants to save the world with her. It's all a win. The two of them also just have a really nice chemistry together, and the way they play off one another feels really natural. Though the book's timescale is short, it feels like the progression of things takes actual time to develop, and when a spanner is thrown in the works, I was actually really hoping that it was a trick. Mostyn turned Frida against Dan in a way that made so much sense for her character, making her feel like her cynicism was the right choice all along. Of course she'd been played yet again by a man who's now managed to get her talking like all of her damn clients. Making that break and reconnection feel like a natural part of the narrative is the area where I see a lot of romance authors fumble. It often feels like something they know they have to do, so they kind of just shoehorn it in. But shoehorn? I don't know why I said it like that, but they kind of shoehorn it in. But here, it works on every level. When Psyche tells Frida that Dan has been playing her this whole time, and is, in fact, working for Antiros, it just brings everything together so brilliantly. Like I just said, we have Frida's beliefs about love being confirmed for a start, but we also have Frida feeling like she finally has a family member that she can trust, even if Psyche is I don't know how many generations removed from her. There's a connection she's never been able to have before, and now she's being confided in about a greater truth. Though she finds it hard to believe, Psyche is able to show her, albeit false, evidence of her claims, and get Frida on her side. It seems as though it's all for Frida's and the greater good. It also means that she has to head into the underworld by herself rather than with Dan, and though she has Psyche in an earpiece, it isn't the same as a physical presence. What brings the two of them back together on an emotional level... What brings the two of them back on an... No. What brings the two of them back together on an emotional level is the realization that she can actually trust him And the fact that she's gained a different kind of confidence in herself. She knows who she is in the world of law, but when it comes to love and affection, there is a barrier put up to protect herself. When they're physically reunited, it's this belief in herself that allows the two of them to be emotionally reunited. And like I say, the romance side of this book just works. But I can't talk about this book without talking about the fantastical elements as well. I already said I don't know dick about shit when it comes to the mythology stuff. Leave me be to just enjoy what's going on. Something I will say is that Mostyn wonderfully gave herself a little get out of jail free card when it comes to potential sort of contrivance complaints. Very early on, Dan makes it clear that nothing is ever a coincidence, and if something seems that way, it's simply because it was meant to be. We know that fate and destiny play a huge role in here, so it isn't out of place at all, but there were times where I had to side-eye a little bit. Like, I could let it slide, honestly, but I'm not going to pretend I wasn't a little bit like, come on now, sometimes. But I think my favourite thing about the way that Mostyn uses a lot of the fantastical elements here is that she isn't afraid to get kind of nasty and gross with it. I was excited the moment I knew they'd have to take a trip to the underworld, and I was not disappointed one bit. From the moment she steps into the gloom, there's a fear that sits with Frida, and to be fair, if I had to go into the underworld, I'd probably be bricking it too. Unless the folks look like they do in the Hades games, in which case, hi. Anyway, moving on. She's got as much light as her torch allows for in its small spotlight. Regardless of the space around her, the pervasive darkness makes it feel like the walls are closing in. And then she gets to Charon. Don't look. Don't look. I recite this mantra as Charon's grubby hand reaches towards me. I will myself not to flinch. His disgusting fingers, creased with centuries-old death and decay, wriggle towards me like insects. And then they're in my mouth, prizing it open, seeking, and at last, after what feels like an eternity, finding the coin and pulling it free. Like, goddamn, that's repulsive. I was gagging the first time I read that, and the underworld doesn't exactly get easier from there. I love the fact that Mostyn wasn't afraid to get grade A grim, and look, I'm not saying that suddenly this book turns into a horrifying gore fest 2/3 of the way in, but it does still bring some stomach-churning goodness. There are hints of this earlier on too, when Frida gets briefly kidnapped by Clive and some of his goons. There's a moment where she can almost see them for what they truly are, rather than the facade they put on for the public. The security start to look almost bovine in their nature, like alluding to sort of minotaurs and that kind of thing, and Clive ends up with this fly-like quality to him, because it turns out later that he's a pestilence god. And while these visuals aren't as gross as the ones in the underworld, they are a great insight into what's to come. Mostyn is great at the kind of visuals that make you go, ugh, and get under your skin. I'd love to know if her other work has stuff like this in there, because it's brilliant. And I did check to see what else she has out there, and I don't know if there's anything other than a sequel to this, but given that there is a sequel to this, that does give me some hope. Now, given that this is a fantasy tale as much as it is a romance, we have to have ourselves a little standoff at the end. Finally, we get face to face with Anteros himself. While it isn't my favourite aspect of the novel, I like what she managed to achieve with it. It served as a great culmination of Frida's character arc. The power she finds in this moment is within herself, but has been gained by her ability to let herself be open to love. Yes, that is rather cheesy, but you don't open a romance book without expecting a little bit of cheese. If you're annoyed at cheesiness being present in a romance book, what are you doing here? The issue is not cheesiness at all, it's just when it's all cheese. There's only so much a man can take, but even my lactose intolerant ass could handle the levels in here. But I do actually wish we'd seen a little more of Anteros himself before this. His presence in this final scene was a lot of fun, but there was just like, I felt like we might have been able to see snippets a bit more before this. It's never stated, but in my head he definitely falls into that sort of camp posh villain type. He's exactly what I expected him to be, and that's not a dig either. It's brilliant, and seeing his demise was definitely satisfying. I didn't know what to expect when I went into this book, but pleasantly surprised doesn't even cover it. I'll definitely have to get my hands on that sequel I mentioned earlier, and hopefully she also writes some stuff outside of this world, because I'd be curious to see what else she can bring to the table. Next week, I fear I'm in for a treat. Let's say a treat. I found a book called The Wedding Witch while out with a friend, and I fear I'm in for a world of suffering with it. Maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised. Who knows? If you know any of the good mythology-based romances, let me know in the comments below. And it can be any mythology. It doesn't just have to be Greek. I'm curious all around. And I will say that can be either modern retellings, stuff based in historical. Like, I remember a couple years ago now, I read Song of Achilles. Oh my god. Anything like that. So it can be based around mythological figures. It can be retellings. It can be stuff like this. All around. I'm curious. To keep up with what I'm doing, feel free to like, feel free to subscribe, and feel free to ring that notification bell. All the cringe shit I'm supposed to ask you to do in my videos. But most importantly, I hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful night, a wonderful whenever you are watching this. Take good care of yourself. Right.